Amazing. Thank you so much.
So just 1 second. It looks like it's just about to start. There we go. Recording has started. So Ryan, if you take it from if you take it from here, and then I will then come back in towards the end of the talk.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Usman. Much appreciated. I'm very impressed with this, and you've got quite an extraordinary curriculum of events happening. So, welcome everybody, and appreciate all of your attendance to there. Usman, can you just let me know that we're still good for the screen? You can see everything that you want people
Yes,
to see.
the presentation's full screen. It's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. We're not seeing all the behind the scenes mechanisms. So today I'm going to be talking about building high performance, resilient, proactive teams. Let me just introduce myself. That's me on the right, and that's my business partner, Enoch, on the left. I'm a retired architect. I used to work at Grimshaw, Rogers practice in London, and I've also spent the best part of a decade running my own practice, though these days it's very rare that I do any architecture unless it's a project that I own myself. Over the last 10, 12 years or so, I've worked with over 200 architecture firms worldwide as a business consultant, helping them largely do a number of things from systems to winning new work and ultimately building teams. Some of you might be familiar with the Business of Architecture podcast that Enoch and I host. I personally have done about 400 interviews. There's probably about 1,000 up there now with industry leaders and various firm owners. Enoch and myself, we've co-founded Business of Architecture, which is now a consulting agency. We've got over 120 active clients in the US and in the UK. So I spend my time split between London and New York. And we're very proud. We've built our own team, which we're just, for me, our own team is just it's such an amazing thing to be working with these brilliant people. We're very, very blessed. And there's 8 of us now. We've grown quite a bit, and we're a multiple 7-figure business. And Enoch and myself also authored the Smart Practice program, which is basically an operating system for architecture firms to increase their profits and efficiency. My own experience in leadership and communication, Enoch and myself, we invest a lot of money into our own training. We've invested hundreds of thousands. I've been trained in conflict resolution, in ontological coaching, which is a type of communication. We've participated in a number of extreme leadership challenges, so sort of SAS styled training with men in the dark on beaches and doing all sorts of things that involve being extremely cold. We've trained hundreds of leaders of firms, and also we sometimes go into businesses and actually train their teams as well. And of course, as I mentioned, we've built our own high-performing team at Business of Architecture as well. So the problem that many business owners find themselves facing is ineffective leadership creates bottlenecks, overwhelm, and stress. So overwhelm and being stressed out, probably the most common thing that I see with architecture practices. People come talk to us about being stretched thin. Every single decision that the team needs to make has to go through them. It's not uncommon that architects and designers, leads at these firms, they end up building a business where they're at the center of it and they're the one with the most experience and expertise, which inherently becomes quite problematic because every question at some point needs to go through them. And if there's ever a problem, then the business leader is going to get sucked into it by virtue of having built a team, typically of inexperience around them. And it's often a bit of a reactive thing why that happens. Sometimes I'll give people the benefit of the doubt and say that it's not all ego, but there is part of that. And not to underestimate that as well, because actually building a high performing team requires a lot of humility, like a surprising amount of humility that we might not actually expect. And when we're building our own business, we tend to instinctively or reactively fill the team up with people who are less experienced than ourselves. This is in part, as I said, a bit of ego, and also more practically, the way that we're thinking about finance means that we're a little bit more defensive and concerned and worried. So we hire inexperienced people. This means that we see team members not able to take accountability and responsibility. This is a complaint that I hear more and more these days, of team members being unable to take criticism, not instinctively taking accountability for themselves, and not really wanting to take on the burden of responsibility. Now, that's quite a complex one to unpack, or the reasons why, but we are seeing that more and more, and I'm going to put it into the hands of the leaders that that's on us. Okay, that this is our responsibility to create an environment where team members are able to handle criticism, and have more robust conversations. It takes something, though. It takes something. The leader often does not want to hold the team accountable for performance. There's a conflict resolution avoidance. Okay, so being overly agreeable, saying yes to everything, no boundaries with clients, and the team then becomes unmotivated, producing mediocre results, and then we get the same mistakes happening over and over and over again, which just leads to more burnout and exhaustion. The cost of this problem, well, decreased productivity equals lower revenue, so it's going to hurt our bottom line. When we've got an increased employee turnover, this becomes extremely expensive. So not uncommon that we'll be talking to practices and they've got, it's the third person that's left them this year, and they're kind of looking at themselves, why is this happening? This haven't have anything to do with me. And we all know it's expensive either to be using recruitment officers, or just the time and energy expended into hiring new people really can take its toll on a business. We often see team owners actually lacking in confidence when their team isn't really knocking it out of the park, and this kind of goes both ways. That the business owner starts doubting themselves, and then they start creating low aspirations, and there's a culture of complaint, poor results, and of course low fees. Okay, so I think low fees is probably, if anyone's ever in denial about all the sorts of problems that's happening in the business, then we can look at low fees, and low fees is the real symptom of all of this. And again, those repeated mistakes over and over. So the possibility, well, what are we trying to create here? Powerful leadership creates a network of collaboration, and we'll talk a little bit more about what a networked business actually looks like. Imagine a team where our team members are able to take accountability and responsibility for themselves. They're proactive. They're happily leading themselves and each other, and the leader of the firm is actually able to inspire accountability. It's not always this horrible, heavy conversation, people getting upset, the team leader not enjoying having to do it, or the team leader just avoiding it at all cost and not doing it at all, or it just becomes into some kind of ugly fight. And when we've got a highly motivated team and everybody is tapping into their potential, the beauty, the joy of working with teams is that when everyone is working together, you get something, that kind of cliche of you get something greater than the sum of the parts. And it's really true. We often talk about teams or bringing people on as being more like multipliers as opposed to like a linear addition. Okay, what I mean by that is that when there's 2 or 3 people, it's 9 times as effective, right? Because things start bouncing off each other, and when it works, it's amazing. And one of my criticisms of the architectural industry in the whole is when I look at the statistics, I see things like, it's sort of 80% of all architects are working in a firm which is under 5 people in a micro practice, and there's some benefits to that. And there's an enormous amount, maybe 60% of people who are just working as sole practitioners. And I mean, that's why architecture is hard. That's really, a big part of why running a business is so hard. When you're doing it alone, it's very, very, very difficult. It's very exhausting. And so not building a team, not having people to help is a fatal flaw for many businesses. So when we're in possibility and we're running a team like that, obviously increased productivity, we get better revenue, higher employee retention, which is just all round effective. Your expertise starts to really deepen, institutional knowledge starts to build up. And it can be a much more sort of powerful results generating engine in your business. Obviously, team leaders, when you've got an amazing team, you feel confident. And this allows the team leaders, the owners, to aim high, have high aspirations, and go into sales conversations knowing that they are the dogs, and they will start demanding, asking, negotiating, being more sophisticated in their requests around fees and winning. And of course, we have this lovely scenario of the autonomous team, i.e. you as the business owner can go off on holiday for a few weeks, come back, and the business is running calmer than ever before. So some principles. I'm going to flick through this very quickly. This is a great book called The 3 Laws of Performance. I highly recommend it. And I'm going to surmise these 3 laws very quickly. How people perform correlates to how situations occur to them. How a situation occurs arises in language. Future-based language transforms situations, how situations occur for people. In short, the language and the vision of your practice is the culture. It is the space within which every other activity takes place. And the language with which you're talking about the future to the rest of your business is probably the single most important thing that is determining their performance. And as a leader, we want to get interested in how language impacts our team members and be stewards of a visionary way of talking in our businesses. When we've got a clear vision in a business, this is where we can start to enroll the rest of the team in a unified direction. And a clear vision should include things such as, how much money do you want to make? What kind of projects do you want? How big do you want the office? We should have some idea of a plan or how long it's going to take. I don't care even if sometimes the plan is ridiculous or it's just ridiculously ambitious. If it's done well and there's what we call a completion with the past, okay, so that's quite an emotional thing. I haven't got the time to go into in this conversation, but getting complete with the past results and enrolling the team into your vision of the future, and there's a time frame attached to it, there's clear, objective, measurable results. Fantastic. This is the beginnings of unifying an organization and a team into productivity and excitement and fulfillment. And really, as a leader of a business, you have to be investing the time in planning for the future and visioning. If you don't do this, this is one of the most crucial roles that you have as a CEO, as a business operator, that is being neglected, and the impacts of it are quite can be quite pretty bad. So I'm just going to do a case study of one of our clients. This is Taizo. And Taizo runs actually a larger practice, and I wanted to. And I know a lot of people here are probably going to be in the small business realm, but I like this example because it's quite clear, and this kind of size of his business allows us to see lots of different things that he's implemented very effectively, and he's dealing with all of the same has been dealing with the same sorts of issues and problems that we see on a smaller scale. So this is Taizo. He's based in Vancouver. He's been a client of ours since 2022, and he's quite an incredible person, very talented architect, can draw just some of the most beautiful drawings you can imagine. This is the sort of work that he does. So it's multi-family housing, mixed-use developments, and there's a splattering of single residential dwellings all in the beautiful landscape of Vancouver. As you can see, those amazing blue skies there that they seem to have all the time. The business was doing pretty well. They've got a staff of over 30 people, 50 projects in the office, a lot of repeat clients. Team was kind of moving forward, but there was a lot of problems. Some of the issues, he was working crazy long hours, 60-hour plus weeks, often 7 days a week. You can imagine what kind of toll that takes on a person, and unfortunately not an uncommon story. Constant frustration, stress, bringing work home. As I was saying earlier about the junior staff, so the team had been built up, a lot of junior people helping him up front, but just not experienced enough to take projects on and run them by themselves. And this ends up drawing so much resource from a business. Again, I know as a profession, whether we're technologists or we're architects, there's something nice about a profession where we love to give back to the next generation or are involved in the nurturing of the next generation. And that's an important kind of part of office culture. However, we're not schools. Our businesses are not education centers, and we have to earn the right to be able to train people and do it properly. And actually, to not have earned that right and try and create an environment where we're endangering the business through employing lots of inexperienced people, and now we're having to invest so much time training them, is not fair on either the business or that person. And what we often see happen is this cycle of bringing in younger team members. They can't really do a lot. You train them, they get good, they're fed up with the whole process, and they leave, and you start again. Another one of Taizo's pains was being too accessible to clients, so not having those clear boundaries put into place, not being selective in the work being brought in. Okay, so this is often another reason for why we might be suffering with low fees. After we were still working with Taizo now, so this is still very much a work in process, but now in 2025, he's started to work normal hours. He's had free time to pursue other life goals. He had a book published in last autumn of all of his beautiful hand-drawn sketches. They've got consistency running through all their projects, and they're now able to go after bigger, larger tower blocks that they've been wanting to do. Their company is built on what is being said no to. So there's a good, clear structure for when Taizo puts his hand up and says, nope, not doing that. Or even just being able to protect his own time from other people in the office. And there's a communication structure now so that he can protect his own time in the office so that he's not disturbed, not distracted. They've got communication structure, there's financial visibility on the projects, and they share, they're transparent, okay? Or they're beginning this journey of becoming transparent with the rest of the team about how the business works. And I can't stress how important that is. And they're starting to see team members now becoming mentors, becoming highly proactive. They share their vision, and Taizo's now able to go off to Japan and enjoy the firm whilst it's running by himself. So I run through the steps that Taizo implemented here as us kind of assisting him with this. But the first thing is creating a compelling vision with a plan. Taizo draws beautifully, and I'm going to use a lot of his little sketches of how he has actually taken this idea of design to actually bring about the future of his firm. Inside of the red box here was the existing architecture practice, and he had a lot of aspirations. At the top there, you can see the word profit, and we had a lot of conversations about the importance of being a profit-focused business and what that allows. So you can see these two arms coming out of profit, and they're feeding this a kind of non-profit type of work that they want to be doing, and being able to do other sorts of more social causes. There's a whole load of different sectors that they wanted to get into, for municipality work, universities. And then on the right-hand side, he started to design what he wanted to be doing more of in his personal life. So being able to have his art exhibition and publish his book, that was one of his kind of most important goals, and wanted to be involved in furniture design. So when we're looking at designing a firm, we always want to be looking, number one, at the financial future, so that we start getting clear on what our net operating revenue is. What's the vision for our revenue? What's the vision for our profit? What's the vision for my salary and the team's salary? And we have this metric called, I call it the 200 Club. It's a benchmarking performance measure, which is your net operating revenue divided by the amount of full-time equivalent employees that you have in a firm. Now, we have as a benchmark $200,000, that's US dollars, per full-time equivalent employee. It's about £160,000 per full-time equivalent employee. If you're bringing out that much amount of revenue, and the ratio is working out to be that's the benchmark, the hallmark of a high performance business. It's not easy, but it's if you're there, there's a lot of things working well in the business. Okay. In the UK, I would say, 140 to 160 is kind of equivalent there. The US market tends to be, the US economy is a lot more buoyant than the UK's, but we still see architecture firms in the UK doing very well. I know some of the larger practices are up at around £400,000 per full-time equivalent employees. I've looked through the AJ100 and looked at some of those businesses. So our financial future is very, very critical. We also want to get an idea of our lifestyle. What do we want to be doing? Money in and of itself, most of us don't like to just adore money for money's sake, but money is the great facilitator. It's an index of agency of what we want to be able to do. So being able to have a vision for how we're going to be using our money and the ways that we can be benefiting others and our lifestyle, that's very important. And every time I speak to architects and designers about what they want to do with all of their profit and their money, I'm always inspired and impressed, because I really do think architects and architectural technologists and designers should be wealthy and have a lot of money, because they spend their money well and they buy beautiful things and they do good things to the planet, and they invest in interesting projects. So there's a responsibility for our financial stewardship. Some more drawings here. This one was indicating Taizo's expansion into different sectors. We also use a thing called a summit map, which effectively is a visual representation of the next 5 years of your firm. On the left-hand side is a very simple diagram of a kind of mountain peak, and you might just put each of those boxes, those base camps might be a different year, and then you would plot about where the business is going to be, what are the results of the business going to be at the end of each of those years, just so that you start to get a shape of where the business is going and what growth looks like over a time period. Taizo did a very kind of beautiful set of graphics, which you can see here on the right, where he was actually starting to model how the business would transition over from less profitable projects to more profitable projects. So they kind of plotted out the life cycle of a lot of the projects that they had on the books, and you can start to see the kind of graph that's flipped upside down on the bottom going to the right. That's the beginning of these newer, bigger projects that they wanted to be taken on. So a really nice diagram that you could spend a lot of time just kind of getting into, but a good visual representation of the growth of the firm. He then co-created this vision So he had his team involved in it. They had a thing called a vision day, where they all got together as a group and shared ideas. And in part of that, it was important for the individual team owners to have a vision for their career trajectories, where they wanted to go. So we worked with Taizo to establish this kind of strata, or this ladder of career progression inside of the office. So people could start to see a future for themselves. And this is really important, of kind of aligning individual vision with the vision of the office. And of course, this vision must be tracked, measured, and planned. And this is an iterative process, which has got to be a discipline in the business. The next thing that resilient teams is organization. This is what we don't want, which is the bottleneck, which is you're at the center. All the decisions are coming through to you. This is the cause of overwhelm and stress. Usually it looks something like this in a firm, the principals at the top, and then you've got this flat hierarchy. I absolutely hate it when businesses tell me that they've got a flat hierarchy. Lots of designers say this with a lot of pride, and I know that usually it just means it's going to be chaos and craziness. I appreciate, though, however, in the context of being creative, yes, having everybody in the team sat around a table and churning out ideas, great, okay? But in terms of accountability and how people are held accountable, there's got to be a hierarchy. There's got to be a hierarchy. When I worked at RSHP, they used to very proudly say that they were flat. It was a flat office. They were not. They were very well structured in terms of a very clear hierarchy. But when I hear architects talking about it being flat, I'm assuming really they mean that's how the conversation about design works, okay? So this was Taizo's diagram of his practice. This is where we want to be going, which is a network. If you imagine Jeff Bezos, they've got over 1.5 million employees at Amazon. He doesn't talk to 1.5 million employees every day. There's probably a leadership team of about 10, and those 10 people then have 10 under them, and so on and so on and so on. So that's what we call a networked model. For a small firm, it might look something like this, where you've got a senior designer, you've got the principal at the top, and then there's a team of more experienced people underneath that senior person. And then we can start building that out into a larger firm. So this was what Taizo started to design in his firm, and basically was moving away from the flat hierarchy. He appointed 3 studio unit leaders of his top 3 people. He basically kind of created 3 small businesses within inside of the one large firm. He's got his vision day up. He's got routines and disciplines being put into place on how to communicate, and the team suddenly becomes way more well structured. This one thing, doing this took about 6 months to kind of implement and enroll everyone to do it properly, but it would really freed up Taizo's time, and also put people into a position of leadership which they started to thrive in. And finally, a proactive team needs a leader, and a good leader is somebody who creates other leaders. Okay, so what Taizo was doing there was he was creating other leaders. He was identifying leadership possibilities and positions. He had to let go of some of the things that he enjoyed doing. This is where I mean there's a humility involved in all of this. He had to let go and allow other people to step up to the plate and have them powerfully enrolled. He was able to create a context for a new possibility. So that's what the vision was doing. Here's where we're going. This is what it looks like. Here's the new promised land. Kind of like, you know, the sort of story of the classic story of Exodus, right? Moses leading the Israelites out into the desert. There's got to be some sort of vision that's taking people out to follow you. And this idea of completing the past. Okay, so sometimes firms have had a really rocky past, and it needs a mature leader to acknowledge what hasn't been working. Okay, and there might be a bit of vulnerability here. This is a kind of complex topic, but getting complete with the past and making sure that the rest of the team you've listened to the team, their complaints, their gripes, where you've let them down. There's a kind of honesty that happens with this, but that can be incredibly powerful and can, you know, bring the team back into alignment. So as I was saying, Taizo's business, they've now got 3 studios. These are some of the other things that they're working on. As I said, the before 60 hours pain. Now we've got him working to normal hours, consistency through projects, communication structure, etc. So I think that's my time, but I'm going to answer a few questions here, and of course, anybody who wants to get into contact with me, you can reach me here at Rion@businessofarchitecture.com. We provide training and growth plans for all sorts of architectural design businesses.
Thank you very much, Rion. That was a really, really good talk, to be honest. And it was great that you used a real world example, because that obviously creates a bit of a connection for everyone to sort of really follow through and create that connection when they may have fallen into a norm. We've got a few questions in. Please do ask any further questions in the chat box, and I can then field them to Rion. So we have a question in from Catherine. With a large number of companies requesting staff to return to the office full time, what are your thoughts on this affecting building high performing, resilient and proactive teams within the architecture world?
That's a good one. It really depends on the culture of the firm. To be fair, I mean, it's interesting. Our business here at Business of Architecture, we're a completely digital firm, right? And in fact, I was working with Nicole, who's one of our amazing coaches. I'd been working with her for 5 years, and the first time I met her in person was at my wedding last year. And it's amazing the relationship and the depth that you can get to with people working online in different parts of the world. So I'm a big advocate of it, and I love it. However, it comes with a lot of constraints, and I really think that, particularly for younger team members, like, you're just missing out. You're missing out on your career development. You're missing out on being able to lead a project. You're missing out on the osmosis that happens in terms of being able to pick up, loads of extra education and experience from just being in the office. So, most practices that we're seeing are kind of coming to a kind of hybrid model. I think that if you want to work from home, really, it's not good for younger team members, and if people are really insistent on it, then maybe they should become contractors. And that's often a conversation that we have with a lot of our clients. If someone really wants the flexibility and the complete freedom to work from wherever they want, whenever they want, then okay, that's great. But then you can't expect to have all of the kind of benefits that the firm might be providing from you being in there and being part of a team. I think if you do have a lot of remote work, then the digital communication world is getting better and better and better. So you've got to be masterful with your digital communication, and I mean, like, you've got to have multiple digital platforms open all the time so that you can kind of create that sense of the office. In our team, sometimes we'll open up a Zoom room and we'll all go in there and we'll just work together so that we're all in the same space. Slack has got to be, or Slack or Microsoft Teams. These platforms are pretty amazing. I think it's harder as well for businesses that have always operated in the traditional sense in an office to migrate into a digital environment where everyone's working from home, and it can be very, very, very damaging. So each business has to kind of assess what works for them. I would advise having a work from home policy that is clearly laid out, and that team members know it, and that more flexibility and freedom should be a perk of experience and responsibility. And so if you want to be, people want to become, they want to have more of that benefit, then either they take on responsibility 100% and become a contractor or run their own business, or it's something that happens as you progress your career at a firm, and you're able to be, you've got that experience and leadership. I mean, we see it. We've got a firm at the moment, and they've got one of their team members, very experienced architect, who does all of their CA work, so contract admin work, in California whilst the projects are in Florida. And they do it with loads of digital, site trips and things like that. Again, it has its constraints, but that kind of thing is possible. But the level of communication is imperative. And I would also advise, any kind of remote business. It actually can work quite well for a young business where you're building up pace and momentum. And if you're doing a lot of outsourcing, okay, fine, that can work as well. But bringing people together in the same space periodically, once a year, twice a year, that also is very good. I hope that
was beautifully answered. Thank you for that. We've got a few more questions. So please, again, if anyone has any burning questions, please do let us know. We've got a question in from AJ. It goes to our conversation probably just before the talk started. So I have for some time been considering many of these principles. When I first heard the idea of the £160,000 employee to a couple of years ago, I laughed out loud. However, I can now see how this is possible. The journey to get there is all encompassing, and I would be interested to understand where you would start. Standard operation procedures, a marketing machine, recruitment. It's all a bit overwhelming when I'm trying to run a team of 7 people on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, the easy answer is to speak to the business of architecture.
Absolutely. No, very good, very good question. And I mean, that's one of the most important steps, actually, is just to believe that it's possible, right? We've got clients. This blew my mind. Okay, we've got 2 clients now who are taking home personal salary 7 figures. That's $1 million. I thought that was only in the world of Starkitects and your kind of Patrick Schumachers.
You're raising the bar even further.
It blew my mind, and it was so inspiring to see people do that. And there are firms that they get into a niche, they run the business well, they run it like a business, they do beautiful work, and they build a team. They build a really good team around them, and they go and make that happen. But the idea of the 160,000 per employee, the first place actually I would start is marketing and sales. And learn negotiation, learn selling, learn how to generate leads off your own back. Okay, so the conversational skills of picking up the phone and making phone calls to people that you don't know, or the skill set of identifying who is the target market that you want to be going after, who are the most profitable clients. You've got to know who the most profitable clients are for you and your firm. That has to be kind of the clear thing. There's a whole load of kind of financial exercises to go through in terms of making sure that you understand what your costs are and how to set your fees. But ultimately, money begins with your ability to negotiate well and to attract and pursue the profitable sorts of clients, and then having a conversational skill set of being able to deal with objections. So we're not doing this kind of writing proposals, have a 15-minute conversation with a developer and then spend 3 hours writing a proposal, sling it out, and then just fingers crossed hope we get what we want, because it's a very ineffective way of negotiating. So marketing and sales, identifying who the most profitable clients are, and then starting to really get in their world, right? Like, to just put all architecture on the back burner for a moment and become obsessed with the client that you're pursuing. Like, you're an advocate and ally for them. And if you're working with, business to business kinds of clients, then you want to know everything about their trade, about their industry. What are their pains? What are their problems? What are the constraints that they're dealing with? What's their business agenda? How are they growing? What are they looking to do? And that changes the nature of the kinds of conversations that you start to have. where you become one more of an advisor and a strategic partner, and you can enter into relationship and conversations before people know that they need an architect or an architectural technologist. And then that becomes a great way of now you can start to bring more value to the table because you've listened. You spent time understanding, well, what is valuable to this person? The thing that I hear so much in the architecture industry is always, oh, we've got to learn how to communicate our value. No, actually, we need to listen to what our clients find valuable first. Then we can start to, then we're in a position to be able to understand how to present what we're doing as solving their problems. Okay, so the art of sales and marketing, and also some basic cash management tools I would set up as well. So things like Profit First would be very good. There's a few episodes on our podcast that we've done there on that topic.
Great. There's a question in from Helen. How do you suggest that the network business model not become disjointed from the parent business like 3 separate mini businesses that makes flexing staff between teams to suit work pressures difficult?
Oh, that's very good. That's a very good question. Yeah, so this is something that Taizo's kind of been looking at, is not to create these siloed businesses. Some businesses want that, right? Some businesses actually do quite well. If you go into, I mean, Foster's is quite a siloed unit of operation. But again, there's more danger of this happening in a remote office. And there's no reason why different team members can't be working in different teams as well. But again, it's interesting. I was talking to Arcadis, one of the CEOs, one of the leaders there, and they were talking about they have, they've got like 30,000 employees or something ridiculous, and they're making it, and so they have these very kind of pools, repositories of institutional knowledge, and they actually hire people whose sole job is to go between the teams to disperse knowledge that one team is learning from another team. Okay, so as a business gets bigger, you can get more sophisticated and have people whose sole job is to make sure that these teams are communicating to each other. But as a firm grows and you're kind of developing teams and they're getting well established in working with each other, how the office communicates internally is absolutely crucial. And we talk about marketing, and we often think about marketing as being something that's external to the wider world. But when a firm gets to a certain size, their internal communications needs to be as sophisticated as their outbound marketing messages. So it's crucial to start having let's call it like an internal newsletter that goes out on presentations where team members get to share and see what other parts of the team are doing, and that career pathway as well that we were showing that Taizo was doing, that becomes very, very crucial in making sure that you're identifying where do people want to go in their individual careers, and identifying what their skill sets are and what they're really good at, what their personality profiles kind of indicate that they would be very powerful at being able to accomplish. And then you can start to actively design these teams as well to make sure that there is a good kind of flux between them. So if those systems are put into place and you're having good conversations with individuals about where they want to go into the career, you'll see a natural movement between the silos. And then combined with good internal marketing and your classic events and things like your vision days and lunch and learns and presentations and all that kind of stuff, then you can start to break down the dangers of kind of independent entities existing by themselves.
That's really interesting, because ultimately it goes back to that point you made about osmosis and cross-pollination, and potentially there could be ways in which, when you do these bits that you've just mentioned, for them to seek other methods of selling services within the business. So therefore, so that sounds really interesting. We've got a question in from Bob. How would you work with a firm that is prepared to retire within the next 5 years without an exit plan?
how would we work with a business who's looking to exit in the next 5 years?
Yeah.
Again, that's a good question, and they haven't got a succession plan in place. So I've done quite a lot of podcasts with succession planning, and we work with quite a lot of clients here, and I could tell you some horror stories of succession planning, but it's something that takes time. It's a slow process, and the first thing I would suggest actually, and it might be a wake-up call to business owners when they do this, is to get a valuation of the business. And you can work with an independent valuer to get a sense of like how much the firm is actually worth. But if there's nobody, if there's nobody that's been identified as the next leader of the firm, then we're in a bit of a precarious situation. And so when we meet people like that, then the first thing is that we start looking at is, okay, we need to start visualizing the business without the current business owner there. And that business owner usually is doing the job of like 3 or 4 people. And we need to start to systematically hire those people, get them into positions, and identify if there's somebody in the existing business who could then take over the managing director role, or does that need to be somebody who's brought in externally? And then you can start looking at what your options are, because really, your succession plan is either going to be that you sell it to younger team members who come up and they get identified and they become leaders, and then they learn all the skill sets that need to be managing directors, or you sell it to an external party. And usually that in that situation as well, the managing director, the owner would need to kind of handle the transition and be around for a few years and then peter out, and then the business kind of either gets broken apart. And there's different reasons for why a company might be buying a firm. Maybe it's access into a particular sector, or it's a talent grab. Okay, but it's worthwhile kind of, if you haven't identified anybody yet, or we need to start thinking about that, because it takes time. It really takes time. 5 years is kind of a good time frame to be able to do it. The bigger firms take 10, but there's a lot of kind of moving parts, and you want to kind of again, kind of similar to what I was talking about with Taizo, actually identifying, well, what do you want? Like, what does the person who's retiring want from the firm? Do they want a big payout? Do they know what their kind of financial goal is? Do they have pensions? Do they have assets in place? What does their financial future look like? So again, kind of starting there with a vision and talking with a financial planner on the personal side, and then perhaps speaking to somebody about getting a valuation of the firm. And that can be a useful exercise, because it might be way less than what you were expecting, a little bit upsetting, but that becomes a really good motivator of like, okay, now here are the things that I need to do to bring more value to the firm, which is normally build out teams, build out SOPs, so that business can operate without you.
I've got 2 final questions. So we've got one in from Jake. Many SMEs have horrendous runoff insurance bills. Are you seeing firms opting to pass the practice on for very low fees to pass on the ongoing costs?
That's another interesting question. So with a firm, I would be seeing most firms looking to kind of sell, and if they sell, then obviously their insurance kind of gets passed on to the next person. We had a client in Canada actually who was looking at closing up, and they had a kind of effectively a runoff for their insurance, and that runoff followed them even if they were to set up a new business, right? So if they close this one business off, it was following them around, and it became quite complicated. But what I would say to that is that when you're handing the business over, or say you're passing it off to the next generation, is that the next generation is sufficiently infused, and they know what they're doing, and they've got a clear vision for what the business is doing, so that the insurance runoff then just becomes a small expense to them because they've got a vision of creating a more profitable practice. And again, if you're just looking at closing up, shutting the doors, then you'll have to have your runoff put aside there to pay for it, basically.
Great. And the final question is from Ryan. Going from a flat structure to a tiered hierarchy, how would you suggest managing the inevitable situation of some people feeling like there is a dilution of their position? Not everyone can be promoted or provided with a position of leadership/management.
Excellent. Very good. That's where the individual summit maps for people is so important. So important. And you've got to take the time and, again, use the hierarchy to make sure that everybody is listened to, and that the vision that you're creating for the business is big enough that it can house everybody's ambitions. That's a great. I mean, that's a good problem actually for a leader to have. That you've got people who are hungry for more responsibility and a higher position, and that's when we can start to have good career development conversations with individuals and have them. Firstly, if you've got a kind of tiered, that little diagram we saw, Taizo, and each of those positions is kind of clearly worked out in terms of what are the kind of key performance indicators and the levels of experience that are expected from each of these tiers. And you can sit down with somebody and have them kind of self-evaluate on a scale of 1 to 10, for example, of how well they think they are in all of this levels of experience and skill sets. Then you can give them like a reality check and say, actually, I don't think they're quite in a line. And then that's the beginnings of building a career plan for that person. But that's a good that's a good sign when you've got people who they're wanting more responsibility. Like we want that, and we want to be able to have meaningful conversations with people about it and sit down and work with them. Here's where I think I can see you going, and if you and also to be kind of helping team members understand what provides economic value for the business, right? So that there are skills that you might not be able to give them, but skills if they went and got, and whether that's learning, taking on leadership programs or whatever, that they have the ability to raise their salaries.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we could carry on for quite some time in regards to these really interesting questions. And thank you so much for your time, Ryan. Just popped up on the screen with the CPD that we've just had. So the CPD in 43. Thank you very much for everyone attending today. I've got another sneak peek of our calendar coming up. So we've just had our talk from Rion Willard from the Business of Architecture, building high-performing, resilient, proactive teams. Our following talk in February is from Spec Studio, Introduction to Specifications and Consultancy. And here's a complete calendar year for you guys to have a look at. So we have obviously our talk that's happened today. We've got one from Spec Studio in February, two talks in March, one from MyTech, one on fire and life safety in buildings from R5 Consultants. April will be from the BSI. May will be a talk on psychological health for ATs from the Architects Benevolent Society. In June, we've got how ATs can shape health and well-being from Anne Vanner from Healing Buildings. We've got a special for this year with our 60th anniversary of the Institute, which will be in July, from Adam Endicott from Central Office. And then August will be from Will Arnold from iStruct-E, who sits on the board for iStruct-E, and it will be specifically regarding embodied carbon and reducing that, working with a structural engineer. We've got September, which will be limiting thermal bridging by design from Dr. Matthew Brooke-Peat. October is a planning and regeneration update from Sean Lewis and Garrett Jones. November, wildlife friendly lighting design from Jennifer Neal. And then to wrap up the year, we have Why Specify Natural Slate and Phyllite from Simon Johnstone from SSQ Riverstone. So thank you everyone for attending. Please do give us any of your feedback. Please do reach out to us directly if you have any other comments, any other events that you'd like us to hold. Your feedback is hugely appreciated. And thank you very, very much from Ryan. And for tuning in and for doing this talk. Hopefully we can have those slides as well, so we can send those around. As usual, please note there will be no CPD certificates, and if you do have any burning questions that you'd like to have specifically with Rion, please do reach out to him via the email address that he's provided, and I'm sure he or someone within his network will be reaching out to you in due course.
Thank you so much.